You were getting yourself healthy so you could do more of the shoulds. It was
Yes.
like, so I can work harder and do more. And then, yeah,
Yes. I never
feel
thought
like
to do less. I was like,
no,
I just got to figure out how to make this
so I can
body
like
be able to do it
lean in
all.
more and push it more. It was like, okay.
Yes.
Yep, that resonates. That so resonates. Okay. So
Hi, I'm Corean Canty, former corporate exec who walked away from the fancy title and salary to take care of my aging mom, make work better for everyone, and help you remember to live. And not just to live, but live well. Because isn't that the point? So join me each week as we reimagine, redesign, and show up to the lives we really want. It's time to do life better. So get cozy, grab your favorite warm drink, and let's dig in. Hey friends, welcome back to the Remember to Live podcast. It's me, Corean. I know on our last episode, I let you know I was taking a little break. So now we're back, kicking it off with a bonus episode. This is an episode where I was a guest on one of my dear friends' podcasts, Brooke K and her Embrace the Messy Middle podcast. Brooke K does amazing work helping soulful entrepreneurs learn to get the financial clarity they need to scale their businesses to 7 figures and beyond. And she is also someone who is very passionate about how we live our lives, how we live with joy, how we find the life balance that we need, and how do we figure out how to do all the things we want to do and still live well. So it's a treat to be able to share this amazing conversation we had on her podcast. I think it's one of the most personal interviews that I've done. We really went deep into motherhood, my experience climbing the ladder, facing burnout, what happened when I got sick, how I healed myself, and my path to doing the work that I love doing now. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Stay tuned because we have more new episodes coming real soon with some exciting guests and more ways to explore how we live a life and how we live it well. So let's dig in.
Corean,
Hello.
thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate you being here.
I'm so excited to be here. I think we have so many great life conversations. It's exciting to be able to share it.
I couldn't agree. And I can't we're going to get into all those because I feel like once we met, we overlap in a lot of ways, especially some of the things we're working on, some of our background, our thoughts, and also where we want to go. And when I was thinking of this conversation, I was really excited for just the number of things that we could dive into. And I was like, where do I want to start with you? Because you have such a wealth of information to share. And I was thinking about, so this podcast is, it's embracing the messy middle. And at least from an external point of view of me, watching you on the conversations we have, LinkedIn, where I know you're active, your community and the stuff you do, you are the epitome of kind of that woman that we want to embrace, which is, I know you're caring for aging parents. You still have kids that are somewhat dependent on you. You have a TED Talk out, you're growing 2 businesses, you're kind of leaning into who you authentically are. And I know we just talked about, you have other things on the works from a professional standpoint. And so it seems like you do it with grace and ease. And we can talk about, I know there's dips that come in there, but what I do know about your story is there was a point in time when you were feeling super burned out and not fulfilled. And I was thinking, can you take us back to that? Because I think I would like to talk about where you were then and then the journey to kind of how you got to where you are now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the thing is, there were actually 2 points in my career where I experienced burnout to the point where it physically impacted my body. And the first one was actually earlier in my career, mid-career, when I was about, maybe close to 10 years in, in a leadership role, newer leadership roles, taking on the stress. My kids were still young at that point. And I started just having all these things happen. I was tired, I was exhausted, I didn't feel good. My eyes got inflamed. I had all these weird symptoms, went to all the doctors. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. They kept wanting to just prescribe random medications to try. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So that's actually kind of started my well-being journey on the side. That's when I got into yoga and I got into breath work and I got into Ayurveda and I started learning these tools to heal myself. And so I learned those tools and I started bringing them to work with my teams as much as I could.
Did you, sorry to interrupt, but for that, did you even know? So for me, stress manifests, it's like anxiety. Like I've
Yes.
racing heartbeat. I have this, I say it's stress and I'm working really hard, but like racing mind and all those different variety of different physical manifestations there. Could you equate it to work? Did you know? Were you just like, gosh, I have these weird things happening? Is it me like getting older?
Yeah.
Is it young kids? Like, were you aware that like something's going on with work and I need to kind of center myself?
I don't think at that point that I kind of pinpointed how much work was impacting me. I think
Yeah.
I was a single mom. I was trying to build this career. I was in the middle solidly of the shoulds of like, oh, I got to work. I got to get to this title. If I could just do this, I got all these after school activities. But I also come from a family who's had a lot of health problems. So in the
Mm,
back of my mind, I was kind of like, oh, I got to do something because they lead
I
you to
could see
believe
where it's
that you're just
leading.
going to get it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that like these things are destined. And
Yeah.
if I can just maybe learn to eat better and maybe learn to exercise better or do these things better that you hear all the time will help you stay healthy, then I can get healthy and be the super human I was
Yeah.
attempting to be at that
It
time.
was almost, so you were doing it. I was pause here because this resonates. You were getting yourself healthy so you could do more of the shoulds. It was like,
Yes.
so I can work harder and do more. And that, yeah,
Yes.
that's,
I
I
never
feel like,
thought to do less. I was like,
no,
I just got to figure out how to make this
so I can
body
like
be able to do it
lean in
all.
more and push it more. It was like, okay.
Yes.
Yep, that resonates. That so resonates. Okay. So you started learning some of these like practices to
Yes.
kind of recenter. Okay. Okay.
So I would use them a little, like I didn't get full into the practice as I am at this stage in life, but I would use them. I would tell a lot of people about them, like people on my teams, and it would help. But
Yeah.
I was, especially as a leader, always feeling like I have to be there for everyone else, not only my kids, but my team.
Mhm.
And like it's all on me. That's just kind of the pressure that I realize now I was putting on myself. And so chug, 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 chug,
Yeah.
reached the quote unquote top of the ladder, got to the C-suite, got all the things, checked
Mhm.
all the boxes. And it was really right the same time that COVID hit.
Mhm.
And it was
Mhm.
just one day I walked downstairs. It was one of those days I missed lunch. I was on calls all day. I was exhausted. It was like 6 o'clock. And I was like, I'm just going to grab something.
Yeah.
Now that I'm done with calls, I can go back upstairs and actually do my work for the day.
Uh-huh.
Because
Uh-huh.
you
I'm
know
gonna
how
start my
that is.
second shift.
Yes,
Yep.
my second
Yep.
shift. But when I got to the kitchen, like my body just stopped. And I was like, something's wrong. My partner was looking at me like, what's, I was like, something's wrong. I couldn't even put to words, like something, I
Yeah.
just felt off. And then I felt like I was going to pass out. And then my body started like shaking and I just didn't know what was going on. And of course, that's like when COVID was new and we didn't really know what was going
Mm.
on. And my mind
Mhm.
was racing with like, oh no, what is
Right.
it? It could be
COVID.
this new
Yeah.
thing. And so long story short, I was in the hospital 3 times that week. I had never tested positive for COVID. It was not COVID. They sent me to every ologist in Western medicine, like the neurologist, the cardiologist, all of the ologists,
Allergists.
none of the ologists,
It's like a
none of,
checklist. Let's just,
yes.
what's one we haven't seen yet?
Well,
Let's go.
because, Western medicine separates the body.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
had to go to like
Yes.
5 different people to figure out
And
what's
none of them
going on in this.
talk, right?
None of them
Yeah.
talk in this one
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
And nobody could help me. Like, again, they just looked in the computer and said, well, these symptoms correlate to this pill. Why don't you take this pill? And I was like, no, I don't want to
Yeah.
do that. I want to know what's causing it. So I went to a functional doctor and she was able to help pinpoint the fact that my body was shut down. I had been in fight and flight for way too long. So when we are like at work and stressed out, and even the language we use, we're like, oh,
Yeah.
I was putting out fires all day at work. Like our
Mm-hmm.
body doesn't know the difference between a fire that's actually going to hurt us
Mm-hmm.
or like running an ad. Like that's
Yeah.
not actually
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
fire, but my body had stopped functioning because when we're in that state and our sympathetic nervous system is turned on, it turns off a lot of things to be
Yeah.
able to put the energy where we would need to like fight or run.
And it just becomes your normal, right? So you don't even know that you've
Yeah.
heightened and then you go down. If you're always up in that, I equate it to when I was in that state. Like if it ever did drop, like, or I, took the breath and I wasn't in that heightened parasympathetic or sympathetic, which one is it? When it
Parasympathetics when you relax. Yeah.
okay. So in the sympathetic, so when
Mhm.
you're just go, 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 if once it did drop, I would think that it was like like the laziness, it was almost like this,
Yes.
this feeling that I wasn't used to, that my body actually needed, but it,
Mhm.
it was so foreign that I was like, okay, I gotta, like productivity, like hustle culture. I was like, I gotta find the next thing. And I like gotta
Yes.
check some more things off my to-do list.
Yeah, I would almost feel guilty about rest.
Yeah.
But my body was, like, whispering to me all along, like, I would keep having these little things, and I didn't listen, and I kept pushing, and then it had to, like, roar and shut down for me to be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you were trying to tell me something. Let
Yeah.
me start to listen."
So once you went through this week and you were in and out of the hospital trying to
Mhm.
figure this out, is that when you had the awareness of like, wait, I think things have been happening up until this point and you were just ignoring it? Like, did you know throughout, like, oh, okay, yeah, like
So
I'm
I
working too
did, I
much?
was feeling it then, but here's the funny thing about that is even though I knew it
Yeah.
intellectually then, I was, like, I was in bed for 3 months. I couldn't walk from, like, my bed to the
Oh
bathroom,
my
but while I
gosh.
was in bed, I was on my laptop joining Zoom calls with the video camera off because I was like, I have to be there for people.
Mhm.
Things aren't going to happen if I'm not there until the point where I wasn't getting better. And I started like, I had my computer and then I was like updating all my passwords so my kids could get into stuff in case I didn't wake up one day. Like
Isn't that
it was
crazy?
like this. And I was like, and then in that moment, I was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I really
Yeah.
doing? Let me close the computer. Let me actually take the time off. I have an amazing team. I had an amazing team of leaders underneath me, and they knew they got it. Like, it's okay. Work's going to be there. But it was really hard for me
Yeah.
to allow myself to heal because I had to step away and to truly heal and to truly take care of myself.
I mean, just hearing this story too, because I mean, you can step out and like and be like, of course, but again, what resonates is like for you when you were say in bed, can't do it, but I just am gonna, I mean, how many of us like post baby or post surgery or whatever, you're just like, oh, just check in. I remember
Yes.
after my first child, I had maternity leave. I was supposed to be with my baby who was in the NICU for a couple days. So he was home by that point. But we had like weekly calls, like team calls. And I was like, I'll just call in and be silent just so I can keep
Yes.
up to date on
Yes.
what's going on. So there's, I mean, different levels of it, but it's so crazy. And I'm looking back and I wonder for you, thinking about that time, what was I know we say the shoulds, but
Mhm.
was it that work was so dependent on you that it would come crashing down if you weren't there? Was it that it was your identity and you're like, if I'm not there, people will be angry with me? Like what because you have that and this
Mhm.
idea that work can't, go on without me, but you're literally updating your computer for your kids to be able to go on without you. So it's like,
Yeah.
and it resonates for me, but I'm curious for you, like
Mhm.
what part of that was like, I got to be there for work, and
Yeah.
or do you even know yet?
So I really tapped into that when I actually left.
Yeah.
So I didn't leave corporate at that point in time. I did start setting up a lot more boundaries and I was able to design my day in a way that was a bit healthier. I had left and went to another role, searching for that thing that felt a little bit more aligned with like my mission and who I want to be in this world. And it was really focused on like helping marginalized folks get better careers and flexibility. And so that was like, oh, this will help fill my cup a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, but I still had these habits. And so we have these habits and it becomes our normal of overworking becomes our normal and
Mhm.
our habits. And when
Yeah.
I did leave corporate, with nothing else lined up for the first time since I'd ever started working when I was like 14,
Yep.
that first week of not having IMs or emails or anything on my calendar, the first day I was like, "Oh yeah, I get to,"
So
but
good.
even by
Yeah.
the end of the first day, I found myself feeling like, "Oh, okay, I can't just sit here and be lazy."
Yeah.
Oh, and I realized that I was so accustomed to the feeling of the pressure that I
Mhm.
started making up things for me to
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
to replace it, and I caught myself and my partner caught myself like, "What are you doing? You can take a you're okay. It's okay to take a break." And like also consciously, I recognized that this was such a gift because not everyone is in a position where they can like take a break and financially still be able to take care of themselves and their family and all of the things on their plate. And so I knew I was in this privileged place and had this gift of being able to give myself a real break. And then I realized how much, even when I said I was taking breaks over my career, I never did. Like even on
Yeah.
vacation, you check. Like you
Yeah.
don't give yourself real breaks. And so once I was able to identify that, it actually took me a long time to let
Can
go
I,
of it.
oh my God, there's so many things I'd like to dig in, but we don't have 4 hours. We'll do, we'll do that offline when I take up your whole day. But yes, yes. So one is the leaving,
Mhm.
which and the I call it productivity junkie. You know, it's like
Mhm.
you're addicted to a feeling. You can be addicted to drugs or alcohol or any number of things, but you're literally addicted to being busy
Yes.
and leaving that. It took me a while because that I mean, there's not really a support group,
Yes.
you know,
Right.
for that, or even an awareness that that's what's going to happen is as you try to. So for me, I equated it to, well, I left and I would create all these issues of like, well, I have to replace my salary. And the way to do that is to
Mhm.
keep grinding it out. And I know that's how I had to do it in corporate. And if I'm going to make the
Yeah.
money and prove myself and recreate my identity. And so I had all that stuff. So that totally relates. But then the other thing on top of that, which thank you for bringing this up, is there are definitely people, women that I talk to that
Mhm.
cannot just leave. Absolutely. You know,
Right.
you're working, you hate your job and you realize all this stuff and you're like, I got to save up enough money to do it. There are those of us that either you've structured your job. I got to, you know, they asked me to stay. So then I was able to get severance. So I was paid for a little bit. There's part-time, there's, you have a
Mhm.
husband or a spouse or whoever that can support you. So there's those. And I feel like there's a lot of times that when your identity is really tied around your work and the
Mhm.
contribution, and you even said this, like physically you needed this, you needed this
Yeah.
break, but to take that and lean into that is like it's like I don't know, like you feel guilty. You feel
Mhm.
guilty like I can't lean into this and enjoy it and take it for what it is, almost like a vacation when you need it because you're like
Yeah.
others can't. And so I need to show that I'm working hard or there's something
Mhm.
wrong, you know, or I'm not really happy and I'm still like at least that was for me. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't lean into that like just the relaxation that I needed and the introspection and reflection and all that and
Mhm.
spend that time because I was like I should be guilty about having this
Yeah.
or whatever. And so I don't that like thank you for bringing that up. And it sounds like that's exactly kind of the place you're in too of like sinking into
Yeah.
that.
And there's a few ahas that I had while I was still in corporate and now that I coach so many people and help them design their lives and redesign their days in a way that they can create space for their well-being, that they can find joy in their work. Like we've spent all of these for those of us who are, middle age like we are
Yep. Yep.
in their career, we spent decades learning these things, right? And
Mhm.
then we get surprised when intellectually we recognize it and we can't just turn it off in our body and our habits. But also, not only have we spent a lot of time, it's been reinforced by
Yeah.
society. Like we
Yeah.
grew up in the sleep when I die, hustle grind as a badge of honor. Like that was the thing to strive for. Like saying I am busy was like a good thing. Doesn't matter. As long as
Yep.
I'm busy, I'm
Yep.
busy. I could be
Yep.
busy, treading water, but I'm busy, so it must be good.
Digging this hole in the yard that we don't need, but I'm just gonna keep busy, like moving. Yep.
Yeah. And
Yep.
I think one of the things now is that I think there's especially women who feel like, well, the only way I could be happy is if I quit my job or I went and start my own business, but that's impossible for me. And it's not meant for everyone. Like some
Hmm.
people, that's their journey, but also you can find like the joy and the happiness and the rest and the well-being in whatever situation you're in. But it starts with your mindset and like rethinking and
Hmm.
reframing and redefining success and unlearning all of the shoulds that have been put on you. Like,
Yeah.
well, like, let's strip that away and understand like, well, what actually do I want?
Yeah.
And like especially at this point in life, when for some of us, we might have more career years behind us than in front of us. What do we really want to do? And how do we want to
Yeah.
spend our lives so we're not looking back with regrets at the end?
Did you know it's such a good point? And I'm curious, did you know before you left your corporate career for good, you know, well,
Mhm.
for now, for
For
good,
now, in this season.
in this season, you had said that you first made a change to a different job with you had created better boundaries and was
Mhm.
more aligned with your passions. Did you know, how did you figure out even what your what you were, I guess I'll call it your passion or what,
Mhm.
that was about. Because like you said, like redefining what success is and what are you really
Yeah.
passionate about and what, for me, I was too reactive in I had gotten on that kind of train. I couldn't, for me, it took me getting off and facing the when you like hit
Yeah.
a wall and it automatically stops. So like I like was then left with like, okay, I got to do some of this. Did you had you had practices that helped you kind of reflect in that? Was that did you always were you always aware of that? How did that come to you so you knew kind of the path to go down?
So I think there's a lot of talk about like find your passion and your
Yeah.
purpose and
Yeah.
follow that. I don't believe that your purpose is something that you're supposed to do. And a
Mm,
lot and I think we're kind of taught that, like, figure out
mm.
your passion, you find your purpose, and purpose is not a doing. For me, purpose is a being.
Oh,
Like,
I love
who do you
that.
want to be? Like,
I
there's
love
one you
that.
in this world, and your purpose is you showing up fully as yourself with your unique gifts and talents and sharing that.
Oh my God.
There's
Corinne,
so
let's
many.
pause. It's like that's such a release. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to
Yeah.
pause on that. So, so good. It is a stop of the doing and the shoulds because you're still then, oh, I I should. It's really just sinking, like it's like
Yeah.
taking a deep breath and sinking
Yeah.
into just who you are and kind of discovering that
Mhm.
as opposed to an action that you need to take.
Yes, and
Ah,
I think some of us are like, "I don't know my passion," and some people I'm very multi-passionate
yeah.
about different things. But it's less about like, oh, find something that you're passionate about, and it's more of like, how can I fill my cup more in what I'm doing? How can I,
Mhm.
whatever I'm doing, find more joy in the doing and in my days, as opposed to trying to label one
Yeah.
thing as a passion and just following that? Because
Yeah.
wherever you are, if you really take a look at your life, all your life slices, because work tends to take up the whole pie lots of times,
Yep.
but if you look at all your life slices, and you kind of find the thread throughout your life that's been guiding you, the thing that fills your cup the most in whatever role that you've done. I have a whole exercise I walk people through, my coaching clients through,
Yeah.
and my thread was helping people.
Mm.
And even when I had like my first job when I was in middle school, tutoring kindergartners, it filled my cup. I didn't recognize it then, but I could go to I've had a lot of different single mom. I've had a
Yeah.
lot of different types of just
Yes.
jobs, just regular
Well, paid
jobs.
and unpaid, just being a
Yes.
single mom too. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then a lot of career roles,
Mhm.
and in all of them, the thing that brought me the most joy was exactly the same. It's when I was helping someone in their life with an aha or doing better, and that's why I do the work I do now, but
Mm. I love that because two things that come to mind. One is it's not about, I mean, God, and now I'm saying that I'm like, it's not about the destination, it's the journey, but it's
Yeah.
really, it sounds like it's following the breadcrumbs in the moment to
Mhm.
get, as opposed to having to figure out where that's leading you. Because
Yes.
to your point, in the moment and finding that like daily joy and what is it will naturally lead you towards more of that if that's what you're prioritizing.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this the other day and just like you had this I love your eye-opening, your quote that you just said. For me, I was thinking about it. I was like, I do believe that even if you're in a job for 20 years, you're like, nope, I hate it. This is not for me. I've always hated it. It's not,
Mhm.
there is something that has kept you there that you originally,
Mhm.
even if it's like, I'm trying to make my parents happy and I went in this career. But to your point, there is something like, there's a reason I didn't go to become like a doctor,
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
teacher. Like I went down the path and maybe it's not right for me, but it was either people I was
Mhm.
around, or maybe it was like the culture that I was in, or the functional type of work. There's something there so to your point, I always believe before like jumping, or I got to figure that out and like
Mhm.
figure out the big picture is like, there's something within what you're doing
Yeah.
now that you do enjoy, and it might not be your forever, but instead of running away from something, figure out what you're running towards, which is like those breadcrumbs
Yes.
of what, but it's to your point, like in
Yeah.
the moment figuring out what that is in
And
any
what, like,
slice of your pie.
completely you don't enjoy and drains you, that many times you get good at because you've done it for a long time, so people give you more of it, and maybe that's why you're miserable because you're not focused on the things that fill your cup, you're just focused on the things that you're quote unquote good at now that you were supposed to do. And so I think there's a way for everyone to, from where they are, make these changes.
Yeah.
There's like small things that you can do to start shifting to have more in your joy cup than your pain cup each day. And it doesn't have to be this big leap, though I am all for leaping. That's my word for the year. Like, take the leaps and take the risks in your life as they come up, like the good fear, like dive
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
the good fear, but you always can take a step from where you are.
I love that. I love that. The leap can be a small leap. It can be
Mhm.
a lower risk leap, but just keep going towards that. And
Yeah.
we talked a lot about like individuals trying to, and how you work with
Mhm.
women or men, people
Mhm.
just trying to kind of find their happiness in the everyday. You also work with companies. And so that's what
Mhm.
your TED Talk was about too, right? Is about
Yeah.
kind of bringing play and fun and joy into work. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what led you
Yeah.
down that as a passion, and what have you seen like when it is instilled into companies, or when you bring it into companies to work on?
Yeah, so I've been doing improv for like 15
I
years.
love
It started with just a class
that.
that one of my friends wanted me to go with, and I went. She didn't go, but I loved it, and I stayed in it.
That is like the universe saying, this is what you need.
Yes,
That's when you look back, you don't know why,
yep.
but you're like, of
It
course.
it
Yep.
it was
Yep.
guiding me, and and I didn't know until when I got sick during COVID, because during COVID everything shut down.
Yeah.
So I had like a regular dance class I went to. I had improv that I did all the time, and when my play got taken away, I got sick.
Mm.
And I realized how much of a release it was personally. I also, just on a personal level, it was the connection and the freedom of going back to what it was when you would like go outside and play with your friends and you had people you could show up and just be and build and create these worlds. And the impact that I saw in my personal life, even while I was in corporate running companies, I would bring the improv exercises in the play to work because I recognized, oh, you get to learn so much about each other. Oh,
Yeah.
you get to get past all of the bias that we all have, no matter what, and start to see, oh, we think differently. There's thought diversity. We learn how to be more creative. And it's just fun. And
Yeah.
we need to have more fun at work. We need more laughter and joy in our lives. And so as I started seeing the impact that this had on my teams in not only the connection, but learning how to communicate, learning how to come up with creative ways to solve problems, my co-founder for my company Shift to Play is one of the people in my improv team that we've played together with for 10
Yeah.
years. And he had a whole 20-year corporate marketing executive career too. And he was doing the same thing in the teams that he led. And so when we both took a break from corporate, we realized like we need to bring this to more companies than just the ones we sat at the table and could because we
Yeah.
wanted to. And so we developed a framework that incorporates a lot of our things that we learned from improv and comedy, but also of mindfulness and well-being to be able to take it to companies and bring more play to work to help just create better cultures, create better connection, and bring like more joy and fun to work. We spend too
Oh
much time
yeah.
working and it
I
shouldn't
love
all be
that.
serious and hard.
Well, it's like you said, like if the pie, the pie, your whole pie, the work
Mhm.
piece of your pie should not be 90% of but oftentimes it gets to be inordinately bigger than the
Yes.
rest. And so if you don't have, like you said, play and fun and joy is so important. And I always think about like the pyramid
Mhm.
of like your hierarchy of needs, but it's like your emotional needs. And like you can't get to that creative spot, which you need from a professional standpoint too,
Yes.
until you have everything like your base layers met. And then that's like the fun is what brings the joy
Yes.
and the new ideas and the brainstorming, and
Yes.
also just the bonding in a different way with your teammates, like you said, which is so important.
Yeah.
And I have to, just from a personal experience too, not just at work, but just leaning into play as a mom, where I'd
Mhm.
gotten so far away from that. I went recently with my oldest to go skiing, and I wrote about this. I think you and I may have talked about it, but I was like nervous. I hadn't done it in 20 years. It's just like, just kind of getting out of your comfort zone a little bit
Yeah.
in like that area. But being outside, I was outside, I was just like leaning into something that wasn't comfortable to me, but it was more physically taxing than mentally taxing, which is what I
Mhm.
usually do. And after a day of it, I was just naturally on this high that I hadn't
Yes.
felt in forever. And it wasn't coffee induced, or
Mhm.
just like, and it had been a while since, and I'm still, it's hard to
Yeah.
articulate, but I've done that when I've gone like climbing or just like leaning into what for me is fun, is like outdoor
Yeah.
adventures, is just this like release of this like heaviness on my shoulders. I'm thinking about like,
Mhm.
oh, I got to take care of the kids and I got to be there. Cause usually I'll take them to lessons and I'll watch and I'll
Yeah.
carry the bags. And anyway, so I equate that. and that the feeling that came in, and if you can bring that into your everyday life, whether through your job or just to
Mhm.
like working with individuals, like how much that has to open up, like we said, the breadcrumbs of what comes next, and
Yes.
like just realizing what that feeling even feels like again, and like you want more of it naturally.
Yes, and I talk a lot about in my TED Talk, just kind of the science behind what
Yeah.
play does to us as humans, and just the fact alone that you cannot become a fully functioning adult if you don't have play as a child. Like, play is how we learn. Play is how our brain makes the connections. You have to play to become
Mm.
a fully functional adult. And then as we start to become an adult, we're told to stop playing.
Yeah.
So it's like almost like we're being told, okay, now stop learning and
Being you.
growing,
Yeah.
stop developing, just stay here. But then you're working for all these companies that are like, learn and grow and
Yeah.
develop and be
Think outside
creative
the box, be
and be
creative, come up with a
innovative,
new way to do this. Yeah.
but don't do the one thing that's going to allow you to do all those
Oh my
things.
gosh, that's so true. I've never thought of it. It's so true. I
Yeah.
was actually talking to my middle child who's 9, but he was talking about just whatever. Just school sometimes has, like you're supposed
Yeah.
to play, but it also there's a right way and a wrong way. It's kind of the beginnings of, and he was like,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. And I was like, well, honey, sometimes have to follow the rules a little bit, but don't ever lose your like need to think outside the box and think of a different
Yeah.
way to be able to solve that problem. And like there is this line of like leaning into that, and you need to be able to sink into the
Yes.
play. So I love that. When you go into companies, is it like a day long? Do you do like how do you work with
Yeah.
groups or individuals? Like how do you guys work with them to
So
bring it into them?
we do. We work with individuals and like leaders and groups, and we do custom workshops, and sometimes we'll do
Mm,
full programs. So we have like a client that we've worked with for over a year, and we do custom in-person, like half day or full day workshops, and then we do virtual programs to really
I love
help
that.
continue to grow and evolve their culture. And it adds so much value that we continue to just keep building upon whatever their team needs. So when we're working with teams, we come in and say, okay, how is your team doing? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you might be struggling with? What are some of the things that you are looking to build and create? And we build custom play workshops to get the team together. And sometimes we just
Yeah.
go in for fun. Sometimes it's just, hey, we have an offsite and we want to have fun. And they'll bring us in just thinking, oh, we're going to do this fun team thing. But we're always weaving in learning and growing and self awareness and understanding bias. So everyone always leaves with these huge ahas and these new ways of seeing each other and
Oh, I
tips and
love
tools that
that.
they can take back into everyday work.
I love that. I think I mean, so many people I know in their companies that are trying to think of like how can we do offsite, there's cost cutting
Yeah.
and stuff, but how can we do it differently and more innovative, and especially with the remote work. I
Mhm.
feel like that's such a big thing now, is like how do we create those connections when we do come together in a different way, because people aren't getting the natural ones a lot with some still remote or virtual or coming in on different days. And so I love that as a kind of an underlying. It's not a
Mhm.
force like let's iceberg.
Yeah.
It's like let's have fun, and
Mhm.
underlying is we're really getting to learn each other. So I love that. Okay, last question for you, and then I want to hear how people can
Mhm.
kind of reach out to you and if all this stuff resonates. But I'm curious through your journey too, and so leaning into where you are now, and I know as I'm learning it's never done. Like there's like more and more, there's always more change, but from where you were before, like this is probably the wrong way to say it, but what are you not worrying about anymore? Like when you sink into where you are now and
Mhm.
just the different words, like versus where you were before. Tell me, like, what's the biggest like worry release that you've kind of let go of?
I think it's not worrying about what people think. And very specifically in the context of the shoulds.
I
I
love
think
that.
at this age and this experience level, spending so much of my life and my career trying to fit a mold to not only feel like I belong and accepted, which can be hard in a career where many times I was the double only in the room, the only woman, the
Yeah.
only Black person.
Yeah.
There was a lot of molding myself
Hmm.
and just knowing I had to show up in a way to even be accepted in the room, not only to make a difference and keeping parts of myself off to the side. And
Yeah.
maybe you see that part of myself. It just even the fact that it took me until like leaving corporate like last year, even adding all of my comedy experience to my LinkedIn because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that don't count. But like have professional experience
Yeah.
in comedy and in sketch writing and in improv. But
Yeah.
I felt like that had to be separate from my professional persona, even though I brought it to work every day. And so it's like, but no, let me just show up as my whole me, as my authentic
Oh my
self.
God.
So
Love that.
that's how I live in my purpose. And my purpose is like being who I am and being the person I'm meant to be. And you got to let go of the fear of being judged for every little thing.
Oh my gosh. That's so good. It's so good. And such a good note to end on because I was just thinking about this, just leaving and having to, you and I've talked about websites and, what do you,
Yes.
like your brand new, your about me page. The hardest thing for me to do. And actually, I just had my podcast that released today actually was about, when you're thinking about leaving, one of the steps is about like your LinkedIn page. And it's less about your next, what have you accomplished and what's your
Mhm.
job trajectory? And it's like, what do you stand for? Update it for
Yes.
just kind of like, who are you? And the hardest thing was creating a website that was me because it
Yeah.
made me think like who am I and not have it was so easy for me to say like in an interview here's this and then at home here's this and then like as a mom but to bring all that together and be like what do you stand for and not worry about anyone else but trust that like you said it's like
Mhm.
turning inward and being like that is your job, that's your purpose. It's like
Yeah.
it so resonates and it's so hard, but I didn't even realize how hard it was because I hadn't ever stopped to think about that. So just
Yeah.
like, I love that. I love that. Okay. So if somebody's in a business right now and they're
Mhm.
like, we need you guys to come in and work with us, how can they reach out to you for that? Or if they're an individual, a man or woman who's like, I need to find more joy in my life. Can you work with me one-on-one?
Mhm.
How does
Yeah.
anyone reach out to you?
Well, the easiest way is just ping me on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, and most professionals are on LinkedIn. But to find out more about the different ways you can work with me and to find a path to both of my companies, Shift to Play and the Life Is Project, you can just go to my personal website, CoreanCanty.com. And under Work With Me, you will have a link to Shift to Play, which is also its own website, and the Life Is Project, which is also its own website. But to make it easy, a one-stop shop, but always just reach out. Reach
I
out to
love
me
it.
on social media, and I'm happy to chat.
And you are very active, providing
Oh,
such great
and
insight. Yes.
you can listen to my podcast.
Oh, yes, and your
Yes.
podcast.
And you can listen to my podcast, Remember to Live, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I know that this is the part where we have a lot in common because my podcast is about like how do we
Yep.
remember to live, especially at this phase in life.
You know what? I feel like the more we're all on this journey, and so the more there's just conversations around it, which is
Yes.
like I heard, what you're posting on LinkedIn too, which so resonates with me and where I am, and then just like your podcast too. So I'm like, we just need to have like more and more of these conversations because you can hear it, but then making that change, as we know,
Yes.
is like I just need like daily, like almost hourly reminders of like this is normal and keep doing this and
Yeah.
you're on the right path and it's scary, but it's bringing you to a better place. So
Same.
thank you. I'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you for what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And more people that can just like lean into their true selves, figure out what their true selves are, realize that they're in a burnout place. And it doesn't mean leaving where you are. It's just, making the small shifts, like you said, to
Yeah.
just kind of tap into that is so important. So thank
Ditto,
you. And
ditto, ditto.
thank you for being on here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something, laughed a little, and were inspired to remember to live. Share that nugget and this podcast with a friend to inspire them too. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can all help each other life better.